the first reason informational text is challenging is because of the text features found in this kind of text. So think about it for a second, the difference between fiction or literary text and informational text. Here it is an example, a page from the very popular book Wonder, a piece of fiction. And when students encounter this page, they know how to navigate it. They start at the top, left-hand side, they read to the bottom, they turn the page, and so on. There isn't a whole lot to think about in terms of how they navigate the text, how they access that information. But take a look at a piece of informational text. This is a piece from one of Twig's science level readers, and you see there are all kinds of things going on. There are things in color, there are headings, there are graphics, there are things that look like sidebars and captions and what have you. Really understanding what I look at and when I look at and how all that information works together is something we have to formally teach our students and reinforce in order for them to get the most from informational text. Here's an example from a younger grade. Even in the younger grades, there's a lot going on. So you see the main text, you see headings, you see a little feature that looks like a sidebar, a caption, a comic illustrating an important concept. So why did the author put these in there? How do these special features relate to the main text? These are questions our students need to be asking themselves, and they can only do that if we constantly reinforce that as we model how to navigate informational text. So when we think about text features, there are really three types. Those organizational features that books have, like a table of contents, an index, a glossary, and we teach students how to use those, how to access that information. There are print features like headings and subheadings. These are super important. Authors put them in there for a reason. They tell us the big ideas, and they can also be used to summarize after we read. There are words that are in bold print or color. These are words that the author wants to alert the reader to, special words to remember. We have to have those conversations with students so they understand to pay special attention to those words and make sure they understand them as they're reading. And there are also those graphic features, the charts, the maps, and so on. And it's not only important to teach our students how to read those features, but then to have a discussion about how they relate to the main text. Do they illustrate the main text, or do they add new information? And why do they think the author put those in? So a lot of this awareness of the text features that exist in a piece of text that we're reading with our students can begin as early as when we have them preview the text. This is a very simple 5-step preview routine. You'll notice step 1, read the title of the chapter. It tells the topic. Step 2, read the introduction and the headings. As I said before, they tell the main ideas. They get you ready. They get you prepared for what you're going to read so you can activate your background knowledge, browsing the photos and illustrations, and then noticing what features are there and getting ready to think about how that content is going to relate to what you're reading. And all of that information in that preview, in addition to, including noting the text features, can really get you ready for what you're about to read and help you make predictions before you read about that. So take a look at a piece of text from a grade 1 science reader. You have all these different features that the author has included. We always want our students to ask whenever they encounter text features, why did the author include them? So if you look, for example, on the right-hand side, the text says wood comes from trees. It is strong, it is good for building. And then you see a chart there that shows some things made from wood. So why would the author put that in? We want to have that conversation with our students. And then you see a diagram of a beaver. We talk about in this particular chapter about why beavers are great builders, and certainly the parts of their bodies they use for building are important for students to understand. This isn't information that's in the text, but helps students understand and access that text. Here's another example. This is a piece of text about an astronomer who works in Africa going to very rural areas to show children telescopes to get them excited about space and to get them interested in sciences. So you see that the author has included a map. A lot of our very young readers don't know much about Africa, where it is. So the author has included that to show the relationship between where the students live and where Africa is, and included a photo so that students have a sense of the rural areas in which this particular scientist is working. Having those conversations with students. Why did the author do this? How does it add to what I know or understand? And you see that the word astronomers is boldface, another text feature. Why is this important? Because this is the job of the person we're going to read about. We're going to use that word when we talk about this particular chapter and probably use that word when we write about the chapter. So let's explore a little more in depth some ways to highlight text features with our students and ways to deepen their understanding. I'm going to give you an array of sort of fun activities that you can do. So the first thing you might want to consider is creating anchor charts or text feature posters, where as you introduce a new text feature, you highlight that someplace in your classroom. So you would show an example of that text feature. You would list the steps to read that, and usually it's only 3 or 4 very simple steps to access the information in any kind of text feature, and have that at the ready for students to refer to when they encounter those features when you're reading in small groups or whole group or when they're reading independently. A lot of teachers also have students generate their own mini text feature booklets. So as you're going through the year, they either paste in a text feature or draw a text feature, write what they know about it, how they access information from it. And this is a really great tool when students are writing informational text, because when they write informational text, we want them to use these text features so they can go and refer to that. These tools are best when they're generated by the teacher and the students together. So co-generation is incredibly important when thinking about these kinds of tools. So some steps to think about when teaching text features and introducing them to our students is I like to introduce them in isolation first. Just focus on the feature, how to get information from it, and those simple 3 or 4 steps. I'll show you an example in just a second. Because what I want to get students ready for are the 3 questions that I ask every time we encounter a text feature in a text. And this should be sort of our mantra. And the reason I use the word mantra is we want to do it so many times that the students begin asking these 3 questions themselves. And if you look at the yellow star, you'll see those 3 questions. Why did the author include the text feature? How did the text feature help me better understand the text? And when and where could I use that text feature in my writing? And when we get students to think in that way, always going through those questions, they begin to really internalize and are better able to not only access them when they read and connect them to the main text, but also think about how they can use them in their informational text writing to better help the readers of their work. So here is an example of a text feature routine. And like I said before, they're usually 3 or 4 very simple steps. This is something that would be great to put on an anchor chart if you were studying flow charts, for example. Then after we look at it in isolation, we want to look at the text feature in context. And there are 2 questions we want students to ask themselves. Here again, we're going to ask them over and over and over in our lessons so that they internalize and begin asking these automatically. And the first question is, when do I read it? So you see at the bottom of the page, you see a diagram. Do I look at it first? Do I look at it after I finish the spread? What do I do? So we teach students that as you're reading, if the author gives you a clue that it's time to look at it, then you stop, you look at it, and you go back to the text and think about how it relates. If there are no hints as that, then you read the entire page or section, and then you take a look and analyze it. This particular diagram is fascinating because this particular piece is about scientists looking at lobsters and their X-ray vision and how their body parts, how we can use what we know about them to create things that can help humans. It's a fascinating book. So we want to talk about when do we read the text feature, but also why did the author include it? Does it illustrate the text or does it add to the text? And these are great questions to post in your classroom. You get to a text feature, when am I going to look at it? Why did the author include it? Illustrate or add to? And having those conversations over and over will really help students access that information and incorporate it into their understanding of the big ideas. And the third step is what I call the missing link, the independent application. This is where I see in a lot of classrooms the instruction falling down. If we don't have students apply that text to their own writing, they really don't internalize the value of text features. So you see here on the side, I've given you sort of a differentiated way of introducing application for your students. So if you look at the bullets, you might want to start out by providing a text, like the sample I'm showing here, where there's just space for students to add the features. Here you see they're going to add a title, they're going to add headings, they're going to add a photo or a drawing and a caption. So they have to think about what would those be? What are the big ideas? What can I illustrate that's going to add to that? So that's the easiest way to introduce the concept of application. And then the next layer is just to focus on one. So you've assigned some kind of informational text writing, and maybe you say, I want you to add a photo and caption to this piece, or I want you to add a chart to this piece. And then the most sophisticated way of application is when students are doing independent writing, you just have them choose which kinds of text features they want to include. So they have to make the decisions about where and why. And that's what writers of informational text do all the time, and that's where we want to get our students. So that is our goal in all of our conversations about text features. So let's dig in a little bit deeper of some fun things that you can do with text features. So someplace like the Library of Congress has a ton of primary source material like photos, and you can also go on the web and find some really cool videos to introduce a new concept, whether it be science or social studies or what have you. So one really fun thing to do is to use those links to the photos and the videos and create QR codes. And you post those QR codes around the classroom, the students scan those and get the information. It's a really fun thing to do in a jigsaw way where you assign students to different QR codes and one person from each code gets together, they share their information. It's a really fun way to introduce a new concept. And it's also a really great tool for differentiating. So you can have some QR codes with more supports for students who need those, such as your English learners, or if there's a lot of reading, maybe you give students who are below level reading something simpler to read, and so on. And nobody knows that because they looked at their QR code on their own. Other ideas for text features, a text feature scavenger hunt. After you've done some text features for a while, just give students a lot of informational textbooks and have them look for certain features, find out which are more popular, which are more common in different topics, and so on. And a text feature picture walk is something you might want to try for some of your older students because it can familiarize themselves with the organization of a text. It can front load some new vocabulary and help them begin to create mental models about the text that they're going to read. So this is what that would look like if you're teaching like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade or even higher. You would put your students in small groups, give them a new piece of text, and one person would start by looking through the, let's say, the chapter until they get to the first text feature. They would name that feature, and then they would read it. They would look at what information it provides. Then the group would discuss, based on what we know from this text feature, do we have any predictions about what we're going to read? Does it generate any questions? Are there connections that we can already make to what we think this text is going to be about? They obviously know the title of the book. So everyone has an opportunity to contribute. And then the next person in the group reads the next feature, and you repeat that process. So by the end of doing this text feature picture walk, you ask the students, what do you expect to learn about? What do you think the main idea will be? What questions do you have about this text? So that's also a fun way to do something a little more interesting with text features. The most important thing is really making sure we tell our students how to navigate the text. So letting them know that when we start a new page, we're going to read the main text. If there's information about looking at a text feature, we'll stop and do that. If not, we'll look at it afterwards. If there's a sidebar, then that's the last thing that we read.